Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right.
CEO 25 years.
Yep, CEO of 25 years, an author, and you do true crime speeches or speaking at events. And as I had mentioned previously, you've turned a zoo profitable, which, like I said, that's the most intriguing one. And then you also busted lottery fraud.
Yep.
Um,
Lottery fraud. Been on Johnny Carson. Those that are old enough think that's a big deal at age 29. I don't know if you remember Andrew Dice Clay. He always thought that was the coolest thing when I talked to him.
I do know of
Paying all
Andrew
my
Dice
money.
Clay.
Smart
So
kid.
go ahead.
You ask, I'll answer. How about that?
Sounds good. So I was looking through. Um, I know you gave the. I guess I don't know if you call them interview notes that are posted on your website, but there are very good questions within that PDF. And I would preferably like to use those. Um, so one off the top of my head is what? How does a small business like prevent fraud, basically?
Sure. So, are we recording? You ready to go, or do you want to start?
Oh, I'm ready to go.
Okay. Let her rip.
All right. So how does a small organization prevent fraud?
I think there are a lot of good examples of small organizations that have been taken advantage of. Probably a church, a local school district with just one business person, classic examples, up to the biggest companies. Basically, what happens is there are three key things that happen during internal fraud. The first is financial need. Somebody steals because, isn't so much you and I both like to make more money, right?
Yeah.
But really, it's when somebody has a gambling problem, a drinking problem, divorce. All of those things kind of tip the scale. But the second of the three things is opportunity. If you give someone all the keys to the kingdom, and that's why a small organization is often ripe for fraud, because one person writes the checks and writes the purchase order. So they have all the keys to the kingdom. And so having checks and balances, making sure you have at least two people approving things, writing checks, that sort of thing, will take away that second key element in internal fraud, which is opportunity. The third one is the hardest one to manage if you're a CEO or a manager, and that is rationalization. At what point does an employee say, you know what, I don't make enough money here. They're working me too hard. I deserve more money. Joe over here is making more money than I am, and I need all of this. I rationalize it's important. And it goes back sometimes to that original concept of financial need. I need more money because my kids just spent all of my money, or my spouse, withdrew so much on the credit cards. I got to find a way to get more money, and you find that rationalization. So it's financial need, opportunity, and rationalization. Those are the three key elements, according to the American Society of Fraud Examiners, that will cause internal fraud.
All right. Keeping up with the fraud. So you busted the largest lottery fraud in United States history. Um, and one of the things that's mentioned is that hot dogs play a role into this. How do hot dogs possibly play a role in busting a lottery fraud?
And Bigfoot was even involved. Well, the simple part of the story is there was a gentleman that walked in and bought a lottery ticket. And that gentleman walked into the wrong convenience store, because in Iowa you have to disclose if you buy a ticket and you are an employee or a vendor of the lottery. And this guy was a vendor. He was the one that wrote the code, wrote all the information down, and compiled it. Remember, Keys to the Kingdom? He wrote the code, he compiled the code, he maintained the machine that drew the lottery numbers for this particular game called Hot Lotto. When it's all said and done, he figured out a way to put a code in that computer and create this lottery fraud. And it took almost 8 years and probably 20, 25 different people. I was ahead of lottery, so we began the investigation. It just didn't feel right. We had an old lawyer call us and say, hey, I've got the ticket and I just want to send it in. You send me back $16.5 million. What? That's kind of weird, huh? So we began the investigation with that. He created the fraud initially, and it went back to another lawyer in New York who then tried to claim it. And then we started pushing him. Who bought it? Who bought it? Who bought it? And he finally said, I don't need the money. I'm giving it up. So he forfeited the money. So we got the money back. Yet it didn't feel right. So we got the Department of Criminal Investigation and Attorney General's Office of the state involved. and did 2 or 3 more years of investigation and went up to Canada, around New York, and ended up in Houston, Texas,
Wow.
where this guy, another lawyer, and his client were the ones that we knew had the ticket. But ultimately, we released the video, and I don't know if you know this, but every time you walk into a convenience store, you're being taped.
Yeah.
Besides that, in some stores, you also have audio tape, and it was the audio that gave him away. He was disguised when he went in and bought the ticket. But when we played the audio on TV and sent that out to TV stations, a lot of people said, wait a minute, that's Eddie Tipton's. And Eddie Tipton was this employee for a vendor that we discussed. And ultimately, we busted him, and he and realized through social media, that's the other thing, if you're doing anything illegal, don't put anything on social media, because they're going to check your contacts, they're going to check your cell phone contacts, and tie it all together. And we figured out that these two guys had worked together prior to Eddie working for this lottery vendor. And so when we ultimately busted it, we got both him and his buddy arrested. Well, during the trial, which came out with circumstantial evidence, said, yeah, the guy's guilty. Jury was easy on that one. But they had his brother come up to confess and say, hey, just say good things about Eddie so we get a lesser sentence. And the first thing he said was, hey, I saw that video. That can't be Eddie, because Eddie don't eat hot dogs. Well, in the video, you could tell that Eddie Tipton bought 2 hot dogs. He hadn't bought the hot dogs, we probably would have never cracked the case. But lo and behold, as soon as he said that, the Associated Press did a full article on him saying he don't eat hot dogs. And lo and behold, it ended up in his hometown where an FBI agent said, wait a minute, that brother who was testifying, we tried to bust for money laundering. And he said that he won an event or a ticket in Colorado. So this FBI agent, it happened 10 years before all of this was going on, called us and said, hey, you should check out his brother too. So what did they do? They got their cell phones and all the social media. We compared those to winners across the United States and immediately found 5 jackpots. So that's how the hot dog came into being when this guy, his brother, came in to testify. Bigfoot came in because the brother was also a Bigfoot hunter. And he would get his friends who were Bigfoot hunters to go in and cash the tickets. And one of them came back with a whole bunch of cash. And he got scared because he got the cash in sequential order. And he tried to money launder some of it through a fireworks dealer. And the fireworks dealer contacted the FBI. So all of these things had to happen to bust this case. Took almost 7 years. But ultimately, the CBS News said it was the largest lottery fraud in U.S. history. And it was quite the team that came together with a lot of different people that each had a piece of the action when we busted that fraud.
Wow. So how long is Eddie in prison for?
The 3 people, the guy that gave Eddie up, his best friend, got probation. His brother got 52 days as part of the deal, and Eddie got up to 25 years. He's been in 5 years behavior. He's going to be paroled sometime soon. So it's I wouldn't want to be in prison, especially in the midst of COVID at any time in life.
Yeah. So now, do you play the lottery or no?
Can I play the lottery? Now that I'm retired, I can play the lottery. And just let me tell you, the way that it's designed, lotteries are run by states. So most of the tickets you play are just state lotteries. But this Hot Lotto game, Powerball, Mega Millions are run nationally by all the states combined. And even though I knew a lot of the action, there are so many variables that we put into these games. It's really tough. In fact, I think I've won maybe $4, maybe $6 since I've been out. Whenever I play Powerball or Mega Millions, I've lost a lot more than I've won. But it's always the chance of, what if? And that's what the lottery is all about. The lotto games are more for the big jackpots. You don't really win a lot of the little ones. And then the scratch tickets are more like a slot machine where you're pretty much guaranteed, or that there are X amount of prizes out there, so you win a lot more smaller prizes. So those are some of the variables why people play the lottery.
Are ball drawings safer than computers?
That's a really good question. When all this happened, everybody said, "Oh, can't have any more computers." Well, let me tell you, the same number of people who draw their own numbers as let the computer draw them, about 80% of the people use the computer when you buy a ticket to draw. About 80% of the people win on those drawings. So it doesn't make any difference of whether you use balls or computers. And also got to say that the people say, okay, we had the fraud with the computer. Why don't you go back to balls? There's been fraud with balls in Pennsylvania. They made a movie. John Travolta and Lisa Kudrow did a show called Lucky Numbers. And what happened there was the local draw officer and the person who was the on-air talent, I believe, they conspired and they put in ping pong balls, they put latex paint and shook it up so that you really couldn't tell it, but they were heavier than others. So they bought all the numbers that didn't have latex paint in it, and of course they won. But in fact, the mafia, the organized crime up there, were also playing those numbers, and they noticed it looked weird on TV, and they were immediately busted. In another one overseas, in I think it was Milan, they had their nephews and nieces drawing the numbers with balls. And what they did was they blindfolded them. So, man, that sounds like it's perfect. It's not fraud. But they would either heat the balls or cool the balls way down or put something on them slick. So then they told the kids, when you reach in there, grab the hottest ball you can find. That's how they kind of tried to rig it. That's only happened to the billions and billions of drawings that happen in lotteries. I only know of 4 or 5 instances somebody's tried. When you're dealing with that much money in lotteries, somebody's going to try to pull one over. But I really like the way that lotteries are run in the United States because they're controlled by states. So you can call the lottery director in your state or the governor or your representative. Whereas if you're playing in Malta, playing poker overseas on the internet, you have no idea what the heck's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on from fraud, the intriguing one is the zoo. How did you turn a zoo profitable? Like what is the process?
I did a book called Dare to Dream, Dare to Act, and you get lucky sometimes. Sometimes people say, as lucky, you work hard. You always raise your hand whenever you can to say, I'll do that. Somebody, a boss asks you to do whatever, and you get noticed. Well, I got lucky. I was in cable television, and ultimately, by the time I was 40, I got everything that my dad always told me, work for someone when you're 62. You're going to be really happy because you're going to have your Social Security and you'll have a good life. And at 40, someone came in and they cashed out this cable company, and I had all the money I'd ever hoped for. I'd been traveling all over the United States, helped start the MTVs and the CNNs and all of that as a cable operator. And lo and behold, I realized happiness doesn't happen on the, when you turn 62. Happiness happens on the way to success. And so I started my own company at that point. I had enough money, and I realized I'm not just going to blow all my money. I like the lottery, but you just only play with what you can lose. I took some money and put it in, started my own TV production company, started doing HBO free previews. And at age 50, again, I traveled the U.S. all over, made great money. I thought, I want to be with my kids now. I want to get off the road. So I decided, what could I do to give back? I've made most of the goals I've had in life. And lo and behold, the next governor called and said, hey, they're going to close down the zoo. It's losing $600,000. Do you want to help us out? We're going to take it over and do a nonprofit. Would you help us out? I thought, well, grip on the farm. I don't know why I couldn't raise giraffes and tigers. So, okay. So we went out, and it really was a fun deal because you can imagine, run by the city, union shop. You put in your 8 hours, you go, although all of the employees really had their heart into the animals, but it never really made enough money. It was losing money and not enough people coming through the door. So we started saying, well, we got about every kid from 2 to 10 coming in here. So let's brainstorm and talk about what are some things we could do differently to get more people through the door. So we thought about, well, how about Michael's age? How are we going to get the young adults in who haven't been through, most people go when they're a kid. They go when they have kids, and they go when they have their grandkids. But how can we get them back 2 or 3 times in a year? And what do people like Michael like? Booze, right? So we started Zoo Brew. The idea was very simple. They don't want to be around little kids, so we opened the zoo up one night a week, and we started selling booze, and we brought a band in, left the animals out, and it was a place to take your date, completely different than a smoky bar or someplace different. Lo and behold, this last year, I think they sold over $250,000 just in booze. But we had all these people coming in. And we also had to find ways, so we cash flowed it right away. Also had to find different ways to sell things that we already had, because the zookeepers wanted new exhibits, new animals. But a new tiger exhibit might be $2 to $5 million. Well, we didn't have it at that point. We had to make it first. So we started thinking, what do we have at the zoo that we could sell, that we could make some kind of exhibit that wouldn't cost us that much? Well, what do zoos have that are produced every day for free? Animal poop. So we started an exhibit and worked with a company to get an exhibit called Scoop on Poop, where kids could come in and look over what a tiger poop looks like versus an elephant poop versus giraffe poop versus all these different kinds of poop. And lo and behold, we started getting people coming. I mean, it was an absolute, didn't cost anything for marketing because every DJ was talking about it on air. And then we decided and figured out that here in this state, we have a lot of white-tailed deer. Now, white-tailed deer have never seen a tiger, but we realized that when you take tiger poop and put it near a deer, they go nuts because they think it's a predator. They're the prey and a predator. So we started boxing up tiger poop in gallon jugs and selling for $20. We sold $20,000 that summer just in tiger poop. So those are some of the ideas to get us started. Then the other way to kind of get us feeling better and looking for ways, we went to different groups. We started with the LGBTQ group. They were looking for a place to do a Halloween event. And lo and behold, we had drag shows at night. No one probably in the board ever knew we were doing it, but man, did we have a crowd. And all of a sudden we became kind of the hip place to be at a different time than just for kids, and a whole different audience as we did that. The final thought I would have with the zoo, which I think probably really got a reputation going that most people don't hear about in our community, is that one of our, you try to get the employees firing up and get our whole group of employees, let's give us new ideas. You have as good ideas as we do. You see the people, what do people like? They said, we'd like to do an event where we bring in kids who won't be around a year from now that are terminally ill. And let's let them bring their parents. We'll volunteer our time for free, the employees said. Let's give them all free food. Let's just have a private night where they can bring their family and friends. We called it Dream Night, and we got the local PBS station to bring all the costume characters. And oh my God, you had to seen the crowds. The first year was like 350 people. Now they have 2 nights at 3,500 people show up, but we never publicize it. It's the give back from the zoo out. And the goodwill that created when it was all said and done was just phenomenal. So all of that excitement started up and excited the people who were donors, who then gave more money for more exhibits. And anytime you can get exhibits of new animals that are endangered who have babies are the number 1 draw at zoos. It really became, and now it's the number 2 cultural attraction in the whole state of Iowa behind the state fair.
Wow, that's amazing, honestly. So then you obviously brainstormed all of this. How did you become? Does this play part in how you became the idea dude?
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I love doing ideas, I love going into new places and helping companies talk about how do we break the mold, how do we look forward, how do we do change. And if you think about it, how many people that ran a taxi in New York ever thought that Uber would be competition? They laughed when Uber came out. Or the post office and FedEx and UPS came out. Oh, that'll never work. They're charging $30 overnight. Well, it did work. So I liked it. When I went out to San Francisco and went to wine country, I realized, I didn't understand this initially, that the people who develop wines, they don't just use the wines on the vines behind the shop. They go throughout the valley and they get a little, this grape, that grape, all these grapes. They put them in the big bushel baskets. So they got hundreds of grapes. So they can go back and figure out which one is the best for this year's vintage to win that award-winning bottle of wine. And so I go into groups and tell them the same thing. When you do a brainstorming session, if everybody around the table, one, you want to only have less than 8 people. You only want to do it for 10 minutes. You don't want to spend an hour. You make no judgments. Every idea is a good idea. You want every idea from everybody, and you want it as diverse as possible. Today's society, diversity is so important if you want the big money, if you want the big audience. And so you get that bushel basket, and every grape's going to taste different, look different, all that, just like every person and every idea should look different. And you take all those ideas, you put them down on paper, and you put them aside for, if it's an hour, or it could be 3 days, and then you come back. At that point, you're doing judgment. You're saying yes to judgment. Then the lawyers can say, oh, we're going to get sued on that one, or the accountants can say, we don't have the money to do that. But everybody together prioritizes, and you'll be amazed how it goes, that certain ideas float to the top, which means that everybody agreed on them, and now you've got buy-in from all of your employees. So getting all those ideas in the bushel basket is so important. That's group brainstorming. We all try to do that. The other thing that we came up with, when I went to work for the state, was I walked in and say the idea dude. When I walk in, somebody says, "Hey, give me an idea." I'll look up and say, "Hey, should we paint the wall purple? How about a yellow polka dot in the middle? How about this? How about that?" Well, I did that by walking into the senior staff of the lottery and said, "Hey, why don't we put animals on there? We thought about this. Can we make them smell? Well, what can we do? You know?" And about 2 weeks later, they came in. Everybody just looked beat up. I said, "What's the matter?" And one person raised their hand and said, "We just can't do all this." I was like, "Yeah, state employees. What do you mean you can't do all this?" They said, "Well, no, all these ideas, we can't do everything. It's too much." I said, "I didn't ask you to do everything. I'm just trying to give you the bushel basket, lots of ideas, so you can evaluate. I don't want you to judge. This is the Daring to Dream piece, Daring to Dream, Daring to Act, which was the name of the book ultimately did." So we concluded that what we should do so that they understand when I say something is in the email under the subject line to start with either action required, you better do it, that's job changing, FYI, for your information, study it when you can, but it's not an emergency, and COT, C-O-T, which means consider or throw away. Now there are rules when you put consider or throw away in there. Number one is, if you're busy, just delete it, throw it away. I just need to get it off my chest. And don't respond. Don't say, "Oh, good idea" or "bad idea." I just wanted to have you give an idea to consider at some point. And in that, all of a sudden, they were doing the same thing. So they understood immediately whether it was that I was the boss saying you got to do it or not. But two, they passed it on to their employees, and all of a sudden, we found like the receptionist who maybe once in a while had a great idea because they saw every new person coming through the door and would get an idea, but they'd be afraid to tell the boss, "Hey, I think we should do this." So what would they do? They'd go down and try to write something on the idea thing and put it in the suggestion box. Well, that sat around for a week until somebody opened it, and then they'd pass it around, and somebody'd say, "I don't know whether we can afford it," whatever. Might be 3 or 4 weeks before you got back to that receptionist. Yet at that point, she or he's probably down at the break room saying, "I gave an idea to management, and they never listened." Well, now they could give the idea knowing we weren't going to respond, and they didn't feel like they could be fired for giving a dumb idea. Every idea was a good idea. And all of a sudden, we had this free exchange of ideas, and we kept writing them down and kept them in a file so we could review once a year and prioritize, because an idea today may be something to add on to an idea tomorrow when your environment changes within the business world. And that's kind of how the idea dude came about of, we have it now. I also talk about failure as I do that. I do a lot of public speaking nationally on ideas, but I often get folks in your age, I suppose, that says, "Hey, haven't you ever failed? Haven't you ever screwed up?" And I'm like, "Heck yes, I have." But most people don't realize that. I know so many successful people that just talk about, if all they talked about was their failures, but they learn from that failure. See, failure is the first step to success. My first failure was coming out of college, and I went into this cable television world, and I was doing some on-camera work, and I noticed I didn't have the 5 o'clock shadows. So I sat down at this. In the old days, we called these things typewriters, and wrote the letter saying, "Hey, to Gillette, I love your, or I wrote to Schick, I love your Track 2 razor, and if you'd like me for a commercial, please let me know." So I sent it off knowing in 2 weeks I'd get the call to go to New York and be in a TV commercial. And as I dreamt about that, it's kind of like if you feel about playing Powerball or Mega Millions, what happens if I win? 2 weeks to the day, I got the letter back. The letter said, "Dear Mr. Rich, expressing your complete satisfaction with your Track 2 razor, we regret to inform you you've written the wrong company. Gillette makes that, and here's our address." I wrote the wrong company. But I was inspired so much about being live on television that over the years I kept giving ideas, and ultimately I've been on all major networks, all cable networks, and social media around the world because I was inspired by an idea, even though I failed.
Yeah, I always try to tell people, failure isn't really a thing unless you make it a thing, if that makes sense. If you fail and keep moving on to success, it's not a thing. But if failure makes you quit, then it is a thing.
And you learn by it and try to adapt it. I mean, it's like the ideas. If you're putting that bushel basket full of ideas, the one idea that rises to the top, someone say, "Well, I don't know if it should be purple, but green is the end thing, so let's do the wall green." And people pick up on those and work on them. So you might fail once. Now, I failed with the zoo. We really did well. And so there's another attraction in the state called the Botanical Center, all the flowers and horticulture. And they called me and said, we're in the same dilemma. We want to take it over as a nonprofit. Would you come brainstorm with us? Sure. So I sat around the table, and there were 7 of us, and I knew everybody but the one person over here. Well, that was a Friday. On Sunday morning, in the Sunday paper, not a little editorial, but a whole half a page where if your name's in that, you're usually going to be fired, is the headline. Save the Botanical Center. What does a big thinker say? The person sitting over there was the editorial writer for the big Sunday paper. And it said, grow a marijuana display. Oh, my God. Or get a Venus flytrap big enough to suck down a cow. Or, make it a respite for people with breast cancer because the dome does look like a breast. My wife said, oh, my God, you're not saying that. You know what? They didn't use a single one of my ideas, but it inspired them to think up new ones. And now it's one of the best botanical centers around the nation that they've put together. All because they weren't afraid to try something. It's better to have tried and failed. That was my old professor in college. Better to have tried and failed than to succeed at doing nothing. And as a government employee, sometimes I think everybody thinks that you succeed at doing nothing.
Yeah, I always hear about, somebody who hasn't failed lives a very uneventful life just because, they don't try anything new. And I think that happens, well, now more so my generation, I see it a lot, everybody wants to play safe. And then 20 years down the line, they're like, oh man, wish I did this, but now I can't because I'm burdened with X, Y, and Z. And
I tell the story in my 50s. I had grandkids, and the grandkid came over, and this is a good way as an analogy. She pulled herself over to the couch, pulled herself up, and what did she do? She turned around and took her first step. Well, what do you think happened? Boom! She failed, right? But what did she do? She didn't realize that was failure. She pulled herself over and took 2 steps. Boom! Failed again. Then 3. Boom! 4, 5, 6, 7. Ultimately, she's running all over the house. Most people, they fail on the first attempt, give up.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be the case.
Absolutely. So you've scaled a failing business. What about your startups? You have startups, correct? Or you've had startups?
Let's go back to the old Schick razor. Dumb idea. I failed. A few years later, I wanted to be on national television, and my local hometown called and said, hey, we're going to have a centennial. We don't know whether we're 100 years old, but screw it, we're having a centennial. We don't have a party. So I said, okay, will you help us with publicity? Yeah, well, we only have 50 people. So I met with them, and we started brainstorming, back to the brainstorming. And the idea was, they said to me, you're our most famous person. You've done radio and TV. And I'm like, gosh, if I'm the most famous person, we better adopt someone. So I sat down and wrote a press release and said, hey, we want to adopt someone, and we're going to give them a free oil and lube. That's all that was in town, free cemetery plot. Ask them crazy questions like, do you ever chew tobacco, or stupid farm questions. Lo and behold, I went up to the library at the next town because we didn't have one in Cooper. Sat down and did the old press release, and I hit the button too hard, and I printed out 44 copies of it. So God, who am I going to send it to? So I went to the library and just started sending it to Miami Herald, New York Times, just anybody I could get, because I ran out after 5 for all of the press in Iowa. I sent them out. I sent out 44 letters. 43 of the 44 failed. Think about that. If I'd only sent out 1 letter, I would not probably be sitting with you today. But I got 1 call the next morning. It was from a guy called Bruce Canner with United Press International. He says, we like the idea. We're going to stick it on the national wires. Let me get a couple of quotes. I thought, okay, who's UPI? I had no idea. Well, tell you what. Half hour later, the phone rings. Said, hey, Terry, yep, this is Jim McCauley. I'm a talent coordinator with Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Johnny, as you know, was born in Iowa. We want to do something with this, but we need to be guaranteed that we're first. We guarantee we're first. We're going into a staff meeting because we'd like to do something. Hell yes. Johnny Carson, what? Yeah, 20 million people? Sure. Hung up the phone, but I picked it up and couldn't get a dial tone. And I heard this screaming on the other end. Hey, this is Judy Steinberger with Good Morning America. We want you in New York tomorrow morning. Sorry, we just committed to the Tonight Show. You can't legally do that. She yelled and screamed for a while. Lo and behold, when it was all said and done, they talked about doing the entire Johnny Carson show from Cooper, Iowa, getting a satellite uplink, which had never been done in Iowa. There'd never been a satellite uplink at that point. But they couldn't get it all together, so they flew us out, gave us a limo, put us on first. We were on for 2 commercial breaks, put us in front of 20 million people. And that little town of 50, had 12,500 people show up for the Centennial that weekend, plus ABC, CBS, NBC, Good Morning America, The Today Show, and all sorts of fun. Well, that wasn't the real moral of the story. Remember, we were talking about better to have tried and failed than to succeed at doing nothing. All of these ideas, like in the bushel basket, I didn't realize you could do satellite uplinks. And so I started thinking about, I've been doing free previews. I was working cable, and one of the shows I did was a free preview of HBO. So we'd go into a town and crank on HBO on one of the basic cable channels so you could see it for free. Hey, Marge, they're seeing movies here. But at the end of the movie, I'd come on live and say, hey, you like this? Call us now and get HBO on your home. But I was traveling from town to town to town to town. And I thought about all of the failure, that 43 times I failed, that one time I didn't. I got on Johnny Carson. They talked about satellite uplinks. Why couldn't I uplink and do this for the entire nation? Just do one big one. So I called the first guy at HBO, and they said, I don't think we can do that. Called the second guy. He said, call the third, fourth. About 5 people in, they said, yeah, when do you want it? Head of technical operations, Bob Zitter for HBO. They drove out a satellite uplink, and 6 months later, we did an HBO free preview and sold $15 million versus of HBO that weekend.
Wow.
Holy smokes, that just shot up my deal. Well, I told you at age 40, we had some people come in and try to buy out our company, and ultimately we did a leverage buyout and cashed it out, and it was very successful, very fun, kind of like being in Google at the early days. But then what do you do at age 40? And I realized I got to do something, so I started my own companies. And one of them was doing satellite free previews for HBO. And it blossomed out to doing a lot of the pay-per-view fights where we'd get on before the fight for 24 hours and say, hey, you want to see the fight? Now's the time to call. And then you have the number down below, and they can call, do all that. So that really turned out to be a really fun one. Bought a radio station. There was one that was for sale. We bought it, sold it, doubled our money in a year, which was a lot of fun. And we started another show. I thought, I'm doing all these, but when I get home, it's done. It's like work for hire. I get my money, but I don't own anything. So I need to do a TV show. So I thought about what's the number one TV show on cable television during that time in the mid-90s. I thought, it's World Wrestling Federation. What other sport could we do the model of World Wrestling Federation? How about soccer? They don't pay those guys anything at that point. It's just getting started in America. So I got a bunch of professional soccer players, brought them in, bought turf for an ice rink, and we did full contact indoor soccer with a whole theme of the coach was messing around with this guy's wife and all these different things happening. But we hired stuntmen to fight all the time. We threw 2 balls in for part of it. So we did this crazy show called Soccer Slam, Soccer, which made it on Fox Sports World. They got more hate mail from the soccer purists than anything they'd ever received, but the college kids loved it. Well, we got busy doing more HBO, so I forgot all about it. And about a year and a half ago, I get a call from someone from the Athletic, sports internet, number one sports internet, just bought by the New York Times. And this guy said, hey, I heard about this, and I happened to see something on the web. Could we do a story? And they did a 27-page feature story on the making of Soccer Slam, which turned into another guy called and said, hey, I'd love to do a documentary on the making of Soccer Slam. So this last 2 years, we've been producing, and that's now shot and edited. So now they're out pitching it to different networks to see if they can have an hour-and-a-half special of how we made full contact indoor soccer, where they would fight and yell and scream and had a great. We even had a brown card. It seemed that someone passed gas, and so instead of a red or a yellow to play soccer, we gave them a brown card. See, it's all great. It's just fun. I mean, the idea, dude, is part of not being afraid to try anything and to throw it all out. You're narrowing it down to 1 or 2 good ideas. But if you only say, I need that one idea, it ain't going to work.
Yeah. What's a gnomon? Or did I pronounce that right?
When you're in that brainstorming session, and I kind of got this when I called the HBO, the first guy that you called, you say something, you see somebody go, no, man, that'll never work. I call that the no man's. And usually, it's an accountant or it's a lawyer, but if you tell them we want your ideas and every idea is a good idea, you get rid of the no man's. That's so important when you're brainstorming because all you're doing, no judgment is so important until you get to the next step of daring to act. And most people are afraid to act. That's the big thing. Everybody's got $1 million idea. In fact, I got one at the end of the show. I'll tell you the $1 million idea. If you want to invest in, we'll do it. That I haven't gotten done yet, but I still think will work.
All right. So with everything that you've done, all the success. I know you were just recently shooting a documentary and such. What do you do now that kind of not a day to day, but or passes your time, but what makes it fun now? You know.
I think I think doing professional speaking in retirement is the absolute ideal job because I decide when I want to work. I travel the world. They pay me, fly me in great comfort, and when I'm done, I go travel around that area and look around. Because I'm already there. So it really, if I want to take a month off and do my own thing by myself, I can do that too. But I got kids and grandkids too. They all live around here, so that's pretty rewarding too, having family near. So that's rewarding. But I still have to keep busy. I think you got to keep your mind busy and your body
Yeah.
busy to survive. I don't want to just sit around for sure.
On your journey as an entrepreneur, very creative mind and all that goes along with it. What were three of like the most influential individuals or things that occurred in your professional career?
One was family. My dad was always encouraging, no matter how crazy an idea I was growing up. They called me ornery, but even when later in high school they called me creative here and there. My dad would always kind of smile and say, "Okay, try it. You know what the heck." So he was always encouraging. Or even when I was successful in cable television or anything I did, he'd call and say, "What are you doing?" I'd tell him. You could hear him. He'd say, well, "What was that again?" He would ask me the second time, and I didn't realize till after he died that he was doing that just in encouragement. I mean, it was so nice because most people either are jealous or doing that. So Dad would be one. Uh, Ted Turner was another one. He was an amazing guy. He was a great entrepreneur. We brought him in for a speech, and driving up, and he looked down. I said, "What's up, Ted?" And he said, "Well," he said, "I have two psychologists." And he said, "My accountant just told me I'm worth $500 million." And he said, I'm still seeing two psychologists. What is going on with that?" And I thought, you know what? This guy is the most successful guy I know. If he's that way, why can't I do it? And so, I learned that anybody can do it. You just got to keep plugging away and keep going. So that'd be one. And then I think, employees, the people that I've worked with, I've had three really fun female employees who were encouraging and laughed and never complained. It was fun. And I don't know, they stand out because you have bosses who tell you good things. When you have employees that are really fun to work with and good and encouraging, that also good because they worked hard and did well and were also successful in what they did. So I think those would be the three.
Outside of trying being one or throwing all creativity, out of your mouth, don't keep it stored in the brain. What would be other, I guess, tips for younger entrepreneurs that you would like to share?
I think if you've got a company, you got the idea. I've learned that most entrepreneurs aren't great long-term business managers. Usually you want to get advisory group around you. You don't have to pay them. Find a lawyer or an accountant and someone with marketing skills who'll give you advice. And it's tough to take advice when you think you know it all. But that really, I think, helped me in the long run. The second is once you are successful and you have money, take a portion of that and just put it aside, and that's your play money. I do that now. Every time I do a speech, whatever, I put money aside so that I can try something else new, try a new company, try something else, invest in something else. You don't want to, you may have to mortgage the house to do your first one, but once you start having family, you don't want to mortgage everything. You want to take a percentage of what you make, put that aside, and that's your, whether you're gambling, gamble with it if you wanted to. You are kind of gambling when you're starting a company, but only spend what you can lose once you get to that stage.
Absolutely. So, quick question, I guess. Do you enjoy reading? Do you read a lot or no?
I absolutely hate reading.
Oh, okay. Do you listen to?
I'm very visual and I love to hear things. I love to create it. It's the old Henry Ford. I don't know whether he actually said this. The story goes that Henry Ford was put on trial because they wanted to kick him off the head of the board, and they were saying the prosecutors that he wasn't very smart. And he looked up at him and said, "You know what? I can pay any kid a nickel to go find out that answer. I'm paid to think up new ideas." And that's kind of been a good philosophy of mine for years.
Do you listen to podcasts or anything of the sorts?
Yeah, I don't like to sit and be near anything that's longer. I like the very short 5-10 minute recaps.
Yeah.
In all my management CEO, I want the executive summary. I don't want to read through them, pay other people to know the details and the lawyers to make sure everything's fine on that and the accountants to know where that goes. I like the high level and get a gut feel of what works and what doesn't. I
Um.
got one other story for you, Michael.
Good.
Damon John, who's with Shark Tank, I did an episode with him. He taught me something in my old age that I think is really vital as people. I think that if I could do anything different at 21 is learn how to relax. I've never really learned how to relax. And once you have success, it's like cocaine. You want to keep doing it. You want to try the new one because there's a buzz when something's successful. It's so exciting. He every night has a list. I don't know if it's 6 or 8 things that he writes down at night. And in the morning, he looks at it and revises it. He does that every evening. And because he's so successful, it isn't something that he's going to do today for someone else. It's something he's going to do for himself. I thought, gosh, that's a great idea to give back. I mean, you're going to help. I want to help, the zoo, all these other places. I want to help other people in what I do. But you got to be happy with yourself. Happiness happens on the way to success. And that's the challenge and the fun of success. But being able to wake up and say, I'm going to go get that hamburger I haven't had for a long time because it sounds darn good, or I'm going to go to the zoo, or I'm just going to take 15 minutes and relax, is something that he does and he can check off. And I think that's just a great lesson in life.
Yeah. Yeah, especially now more so since it whether you're an entrepreneur or even like I don't know people who are following set career paths, they experience burnout so often, which seems to
So
be
long.
yeah, it seems to be like it. I heard it once compared to like I personally think it was a terrible comparison, but people are like, burnout is basically, kind of how COVID is. It knocks one person out every single day, and it's like it made sense.
That's ultimately why I tried 4 different careers. I was forced in the first one in that you sell the company, you got to do something different. I mean, I
Yeah.
was forced to do that. I wasn't fired or anything. I got a nice payout to do that. But everything after that, once I get in 4 or 5 years, my expertise was marketing, business operations. But when it came to fundraising or building the new zoo exhibits, it was time for me to leave. I knew there were other people that had better expertise than I did, so they came in. So I put my building block in that, and they put their block in their block. And so, it's kind of what the organizations need. Same thing with the lottery. And that was exciting because I was marketing and sales and management. I didn't have any idea what to happen when ethics comes in and somebody tries to pull a major fraud and you have to figure out whether you should do it or just forget about it and keep your mouth shut as a government employee so that you didn't get in trouble and fired immediately. So I didn't get fired from any jobs. I had got to have 4 completely different careers, but I always worked 2 jobs, almost everything I did. I always had a second gig going somewhere. I mean, I even do consulting besides the speaking now, and I try to do all these different things. And maybe it's ADHD, but I don't know. I just enjoy being busy.
All right. I guess the final question or our final take would be, so you've gone through many of businesses. You've revitalized some. You've started your own, everything like that. How do you think the so like as technological advancements occur and different shifts and as you mentioned ethics and people running these businesses, starting these business, how do you see like the outlook on entrepreneurship going forward? Do you think it's going to, grow more, plateau? Are we going to run into different problems?
I think we definitely will continue. I mean, you got to look for what is one thing that you have that no one else has done. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. Number one, that doesn't have to always be, and that's what's going to make your success as an entrepreneur. So you're looking for things that everybody likes that you'd like to create that are done. I went to a hotel, and the back of the stool was this box. It had a hole in it. It said waste exfoliating cleanser or something like that. What the heck is this? And I looked in. I thought, oh my gosh! An accountant figured this out. They realized that when you go to a hotel and this big bar of soap that's in the shower, you only use about that much on the outside. So they cut out the middle and they put that piece on the sink. Well, now instead of having 2 bars of soap that cost them, they reduced their expenses by 50%. Pretty smart, huh?
Yeah.
The other one that I have that is you think about, you just got to get crazy and think, okay, what's this? What can we do differently to make this work? I looked up one day, I got a call and they said, hey, think of something that would help us with Mega Million, promote it, because we had just merged the two groups together. And how do you sell more tickets? And I thought, gosh, it would be a great place to put the jackpot amount. And I looked up and there's the moon. And it looked like the thumbnail, where it's bright on one side and dark on the other. Why couldn't we figure out how to get a laser or a spotlight and put the amount on the moon? We could own the moon as a billboard. So I called all over to try to figure out, and they said, the atmosphere would break it up no matter how strong you are. But if you can get out in space. So I'm thinking about how do I get Elon Musk to get us a satellite with a big spotlight on. So when you wake up and you see Michael's name on the moon, how much would you pay for that?
That's honestly one of the craziest but best ideas I've probably heard. Honestly. So that's gonna wrap it up.
But have fun. The other thing, look at how much fun it is to create the ideas. It's even more fun when you can take an idea and take it to the next level and have success with it. Boy,
Yep.
there's no better feeling.
I feel there's probably better ideas as well when you're having fun. I mean, I've experienced, I'm sure you have, when you're not having a good time, you're just kind of like, okay, I'm done giving ideas. And then some of them sit in the back and they could have been.
People buy things because they want to be happy, right?
Yeah.
They don't buy things because they're brief. They want to be happy. And so if you're creating ideas that make you happy, other people will be happy.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's all I had. I'm going to wrap
that's all I have.
I'm going to wrap up the recording. I want to thank you once again. Thank you for being on.
And you did call me a son of a rich once. Thank you.
Son of a rich. No, honestly, it didn't pass my mind, to be honest. Son of a rich.